Hello everybody and welcome to Vaidya's Chess Hub. So in today's lecture we will continue our discussion of the checkmate patterns. We have already learned about 16 patterns and in this video we will learn the next 4 patterns. The names of these patterns are mentioned on your screen. So this will be Greco's mate, the H-file mate, the hook mate and the kill box mate. So let us begin with the first pattern, that is the Greco's mate. You must have heard of this name, Greco, from the past, and many of his miniatures are famous. So this is the pattern that was demonstrated in one of his games. So the format for the lecture will be same. I will be showing you some examples, some model games demonstrating these patterns, and then there will be a puzzle for each pattern for you. So now let us begin with the Greco's mate, named after the great player Greco. So the two pieces that are important in Greco's mate is this. One of this piece is the bishop that cuts across this diagonal, covering the important escape square for the king. And we need one more piece. We need the open H file, and along this H file we need a heavy piece, either the queen or the rook, that checks the enemy king, and it's a checkmate. So basically for this mating construction we need a bishop that covers this diagonal and this square crucially, and a heavy piece that checks the king along the H file. And with this example I will show you a typical way how we can get to such pattern. So in this position it is checkmate in 3 moves if from the white side, and the easy way to do it is to play queen h5, threatening the mate on h7 with queen take h7. So black has to play h6 to defend this checkmate, and now we do this little dance with our queen. We go queen to g6, threatening mate on h7 square with the support of our knight, and the only way to defend this checkmate is to play the move h takes g5. Note that this bishop is covering this important escape square, so the king has nowhere to go, and now we just bring back our queen to h5 and it's a checkmate. So remember this position, this bishop covering the crucial escape square, and a heavy piece in this example, that is the queen, that is checking along the H file and doing the final task of giving checkmate. So again, once just to revise, we played queen h5 to threaten mate with queen takes h7, and after h6 we did this little dance with queen g6 threatening checkmate on h7, and after hg5 we just came back to the h file, which was opened because of this threat of mate on h7, and it's a checkmate. So this is the basic construction in this pattern, and now let us look at some games that demonstrate this particular pattern. So let me go to the next example. Okay, so this is the game between Nimzovich and Capablanca playing with the black pieces, and let us go to this position and let us view it from the black's perspective. So you can already see in this position Capablanca is piece up, and he has wonderful minor pieces in this position, 2 nice bishops, a nice knight on e4 plus an extra knight on e7, which helps, and the rest was just matter of technique for Capablanca. But as you know, Capablanca was a great endgame player, and these technical players, they have the great technique to finish off the opponent. As you know, in chess there is a saying, it is very difficult to win a one position. So basically the technique is that matters in most of the time. So look at Capablanca's technique. So he combines the mating threat with his positional play. So first rook f6, and this move threatens checkmate. For instance, if white plays a move like c6, then it's a forced mate, starting with the move rook h6 check, king g1, bishop f2 check, and it's a checkmate. It's actually mate in 2 moves after c6, and this is very similar construction to the Greco's mate. You will see that the rook is controlling this open file, and the bishop is doing this job of checking the king. So a slightly reversed version, but a checkmate is threatened after the move rook to f6 in this position. So after rook to f6, white had to defend this threat somehow. So white played the move bishop takes e4, and I'm sure many of us will just recapture this bishop with, let's say, bishop, and will try to convert this extra piece. But then let's say white plays the move king to g1, black plays knight d5, and white plays c takes b6. White suddenly has some counterplay along this open file. Of course, it is not forced to play knight d5 in this position. You can try to control the position somehow, but look at what Capablanca did in this position. So after the move rook to f6, bishop takes e4, using his knowledge of mating patterns, he improved on his technique, and he first played the move bishop to f2. What a subtle move. And now this move threatens the checkmate with the move rook to h6. And as you will notice, this is the pattern of the Greco's mate, where this bishop is covering this escape square and a heavy piece is checking along the rook's file. So this a subtle move bishop to f2 suddenly puts white in tremendous pressure. White had thought that he will exchange and will try to hold this position, but this bishop f2 move turns the table completely. The black was already piece up, so he was anyway winning, but look at his technique, bishop to f2, using the knowledge of mating patterns and making it even more difficult for white. And now the problem is, if you try to defend this checkmate, then we have bishop takes e4, and which is actually check, and which is much better version, because after king to h2 we would have this checkmate again because of these two lovely bishops. So, how Capablanca used his knowledge of mating patterns to improve on his technique. Bishop takes e4. Many of us would have captured with bishop or pawn, just thinking that let's convert the extra piece. But a slightly tricky move, bishop to f2, was even better technically. And after bishop takes f5, knight takes f5, again this Greco's mate is threatened with the move rook to h6. So, in fact, after bishop to f2, Nimzowitsch just resigned in this position. So this was our first example, quite a nice one. So let us go to the next example. Okay, so this is a game between Rotlevi and Rubinstein, and I will jump to a critical position in this game. This is a beautiful game, by the way, by Akiba Rubinstein. You must check it out, and I will jump to this position in this. Okay, so here once again you can see we have this wonderful bishop as black from on this diagonal, this long diagonal covering the square, and the patterns will be very similar to the one that we have studied in at the start of the lecture. So in this position, Rubinstein played the fantastic move queen to h4, threatening the checkmate on the h2 square, as we know the theme. And here in one of the lines you can see the Greco's mate being used. In the game, g3 was played and the game went on like this. I will just show you. He sacrificed his queen and then the rook to get to the king, and after bishop take e4, rook to h3, white resigned the game because of the threat of rook takes h2 mate. So it was a beautiful example, but in this position white could have also played the move h3. And it is interesting, here we have the Greco's mate again. We start with the move rook takes c3, that eliminates the defender of this bishop, and after bishop takes c3 we play bishop takes e4. Now queen takes h3, checkmate is threatened because of the pin along this diagonal, and the g2 pawn is pinned. And after queen takes e4, now we have the familiar pattern of the Greco's mate. For the Greco's mate, we are only focusing on this key variation where a Greco's mate could have occurred. There are many variations in this beautiful attacking game. You can try to look out for this game. This is Rotlevi versus Rubinstein from 1907. But in this typical example, in this position, if white had played this move h3, then we would have actually had the Greco's mate after rook takes c3, bishop takes c3, bishop takes e4, queen takes e4. The pattern is once again similar. We have this bishop along this diagonal, and you know this typical dance now. We play the move queen to g3, threatening the checkmate on h2 square with queen to h2, forcing white to take on g4 with the pawn, and now we just return with our queen to the h file, and we have the Greco's mate yet again with this bishop cutting this diagonal and covering the square, and a heavy piece checking along the rook's file. So this was another beautiful example of the Greco's mate. And now I will go to a game. This is a game played between Nigel Short with the white pieces and Ivan Sokolow, and this was a really beautiful game. So we will go through this game now. So the game began with Nigel playing e4. Nigel Short, as you know, is a very creative player, and black is Ivan Sokolow, also a very top grandmaster. So this was played in 1995 in London PCA Intel Grand Prix tournament. So knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Rai Lopez, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop e7. So black has played this bishop e7 variation. This is known as Rai Lopez closed variation. You can play knight takes e4 here, that leads to Rai Lopez open, but bishop e7 is the way to play the Marshall gambit and the Breyer variation and this kind of stuff. So bishop e7 is Raya Lopez closed variation. And now queen to e2. The more common move in this position is to play rook to e1. Then after b5, bishop b3, black can choose between castle or d6, one of these moves, and he can play one of the systems from the very complex positions of the Raya Lopez. But in the game, instead of rook e1, white played the move queen e2. And this is kind of the English speciality. They like to put their queen on e2 guarding the e4 pawn, and then they bring their rook to d1, and then they aim to play pawn to c3 and d4. A very typical plan in also in Mora gambit positions and also in the Raya Lopez structures. So this queen e2 is particularly aimed at such plan. So after queen e2, black played b5, bishop b3 and castle. White went for this plan of playing c3 because he wants to stop black from playing this knight a5, gaining this important crucial bishop. And now we know the importance of this bishop in Greco's mate. So he played c3 so that the white bishop will have a square on c2. Black played d5, a freeing move that he often plays to open up this bishop and also to try to challenge the white pawn in the center on e4. So white kept the tension with d3. Now bishop to b7 was played. Very often after d takes e4, this bishop will come into picture on this long diagonal. This is the typical plan in many anti-Marshall positions where white avoids the Marshall gambit and plays this slow plan. Then the bishop is very often useful on b7. So white plays with knight bd2, rook e8. Now black will try to consolidate here with the move bishop f8 and then try to play in the center. Rook to e1 was played. This move prepares knight f1, knight g3, this type of plans, planning to get the knight to the f5 square. Bishop to f8, a3, knight a5, bishop a2. Now a3 made sure that this bishop will stay on this diagonal. So bishop to a2, c5. Now black is trying to gain space in the center with this particular pawn structure. So white immediately played b4, challenging this knight on a5 and also trying to open up this bishop on b2 sometimes it goes. So knight to c6, ed5, knight take d5 and knight e4. So white has this nice position for his knight on e4, and if black wants to play f5, then this diagonal can become a weakness for black side. So in the game, black played c takes b4, and from here on we have the attacking position actually. Nigel Short went for this move knight to f to g5. This is a really nice aggressive move. Again, we know the preparing the ideas like queen to h5, which will attack two pawns at the same time. And after h6, we can have some fun here with the move queen to f3, threatening mate. And after hg5, knight g5, there is a pressure on f7 pawn, as well as there is a pressure on the piece on the d5. So this is playable, and after b takes c3, let's say in this position we will play queen to h5, and after h6 we can create some mating attack here. After bishop takes d5, let's say bishop e7, then there is knight e6, which is very strong. Also there is queen g6, and again the same dance, like queen g6 again threatens the mate on h7 square, and after bishop takes g5, again we can play the move knight takes g5, and we will at least win the queen here because again this threat is unstoppable. And after h takes g5, as you all know, we will have again this mate with queen to h5. So you will see time and time again this when this bishop has the open diagonal, this pattern comes so often in the picture. So in the game, after knight f to g5, black did not played any of this move. Black played the move f6. Now this is a typical move actually in many Raya Lopez structures. In order to strengthen the pawn on e5, black plays this kind of pawn structure, but again the weakness along this diagonal can become crucial then. And Nigel played fantastically here. He played the move queen to h5, threatening the checkmate on the h7 square. So black has to take on g5 here. Let's say he plays h6, then we can go queen to g6, and after f takes g5 we can just play bishop take d5 check. Queen take d5 is not possible because of knight f6, and then actually queen h7 mate, not just winning the queen but there will be mate. And after bishop take d5, king h8, we can play knight takes g5, again using the same tactic of the Greco's mate. Once we get this bishop along this diagonal, there are very often this sacrifices along the g5. with the knight, and again here this is the case, we are threatening the mate and black has to give up the queen with pretty hopeless position. So this would have happened in case of f takes g5, or in case of h6 as well. So let us see what happened in the game. In the game he had to play f takes g5, and after knight takes g5, again there is a threat on h7, queen takes h7, which is checkmate threat. So black had to play the move h6, but now white has queen f7 check, king h8, and now bishop takes d5. And you will see this pattern once again. If h takes g5, then we have Greco's mate with queen to h5, and it would be checkmate. And it is impossible for black to defend this checkmate on the g8 square. So in the game black played the move bishop to c5, protecting it with the rook. And now I think I will let you pause the video here for a moment and try to figure out how would you win here with the white pieces. It is white to play and win. It's not our puzzle for the Greco's mate, but still you can try to figure out. Once again, we know this construction. We have the knight on g5, the bishop along this diagonal, and we just play the move queen to g6 here. And that was played by Nigel Short in the game. This beautiful move. Black tried bishop take f2, hoping that after king take f2 there will be queen f6 check and the queens will come off. But Nigel just went to h1. He did not take this bishop. He wants to mate the king. That's the first priority. And after king h1, actually black resigned the game because he has to give up a queen here in order to stop the checkmate, and which would not help at all, since white anyways has the mating attack even after black gives up the queen. So the game wouldn't have last longer, so he resigned after king to h1. So this was a nice attacking game by Nigel Short, a smooth positional win in the Rylopits. He just first developed his pieces on the right square, and then once he got the opportunity, he played this move knight to g5, and after f6, probably it was better to play something like, let's say, h6 in this position, or yeah, maybe h6 was better, but after queen f3 there could have been problems still. But the way Sokolov played it just didn't work, because after queen h5 white created this wonderful attack after this queen g6, and based on the Greco's mate theme you can see white won quite easily. So now I guess it's time for the puzzle. Let us look at the puzzle. Just a moment, let me see where it is. Yeah. So this is a game between Peter Leko and Alexander Morzevich. As you know, the trend has been quite similar lately. The puzzles that we are discussing are actually, the puzzle for homework are actually easier than the one that we solve. So this one is also very easy for you. So let me just load this position. Okay, so this is the game between Leko and Morzevich, and I will directly go to this position. So white's last move was pawn to h4, and now it is black to play and win, and it is very simple. You just have to find a nice way to finish off the white king, and you can type the answers in chat. All the answers in one comment would be really nice. And if you could use a timestamp feature, I guess some of you had used it last time, that would be even great, to direct so that I can directly jump to this position. It's anyway easy. It is black to play and win using the pattern of Greco's mate. Okay, so let us move on to our next pattern. Just give me a minute, I will load the board again. Okay, so the next pattern is the H file mate. And actually, for this one, I have picked up the game between Boris Spassky and Mikhail Tal. So we will go through the game first, and then we will study some of the positions. So this game, Boris Spassky is playing with the white pieces, and Mikhail Tal is playing with the black pieces. So before going there, I would just like to tell you a little bit about the H file mate. So an H file mate is actually you can group many types of mating patterns, like let's say Anderson's mate, where we have pawn on g7 and rook on h8, where we break open the H file. So any checkmate pattern where we break open the H file to get to the enemy king, we term it as the H file mate. So there is nothing basic construction as such for the H file mate. Like for Greco's mate, we have the construction where the bishop covers the diagonal and a heavy piece checks along the rook's file. But for the H file mate, the theme is basically we open up the H file by sacrificing something on H7 or H2, and then we get to the king. If you know, there is a very famous concept in attacking, that known as the Greek gift sacrifice, where we play bishop takes H7 check, or you must have known about the Lasker double bishop sacrifice, where we sacrifice the bishop along the H7 and on G7 as well. So these two are the cases where we break open the H file and get to the enemy king. These checkmate patterns are known as the H file mate. So there are many ways you can get an H file mate. In Anastasia's mate, you know that we play queen takes H7 and we swing the rook across, and the knight covers the escape squares. So that is also an H file mate. Sometimes in Greco's mate, we sacrifice something on H7 and get to the king. Then again, it's a H file mate. So we will study some examples of the H file mate actually, and this example is a great example between two former world champions, between Boris Spassky and Mikhail Tal. So we'll actually go through game first. So Boris Spassky played the move d4 and Mikhail Tal played knight f6, e6, b6, so known as the Queen's Indian defense, and e3. Now this is the way Boris Spassky treats these positions in the Queen's Indian defense. The usual way is to play g3 and then black can play bishop a6, or sometimes he puts his bishop on b7. And this is the usual way to play it, but Boris Spassky likes to play it slow in his own way by playing e3, bishop b7, bishop d3, d5, and suddenly we have a position that is quite typical to the Queen's Gambit declined, you can see. So both sides are developing naturally their pieces, queen to e7, rook to c1, rook to d8, putting the rooks into the center, connecting c5, and we have got almost a symmetrical position. White's queen is on c2 and black's queen is on e7 only, that is the difference. So black can hope for sometimes e5 breaks in such positions, and white will try to get the e4 successful break. And both the bishops are on same diagonal, so almost a symmetric structure. So Spassky decides to change the structure and give black this hanging pawns in the center. So this can be a weakness in long term if they are attacked, and they can also become strength if they start to roll on, as we will see what happened in the game. So queen to c3 was played, rook to e8, rook f d1, d4. Now Mikhail Tal going for his typical way. He tries to imbalance the position immediately he gets a chance. After the move d4, it's a pawn sacrifice actually. E takes d4, c takes d4, and here you can actually take this pawn with the knight. Let's say knight takes d4 is actually a plausible move here, and there will be some complications that are provoked after knight takes d4. Like there will be this sacrifice, bishop takes h2, a Greek gift sacrifice as you all know. King takes h2, knight to g4 check, and here white has to play the move king to g3 to try to play for win, because after king to g1 there can be some queen h4 that will be double attack on h2 and f2, and it can get slightly uncomfortable for white. And after king to g3 also it's not so easy. There can be a move like queen e5 check, forcing f4, queen e3 check, and the position may get very messy. So the Spassky was not in for such complications, and after cd4 he played the move queen a5 actually. You know, Mikhail Tal's style is like this. He's the kind of the player who tries to imbalance the position and try to scare his opponent in such a way that the opponents will be scared to accept this kind of pawn sacrifice, because it will get so messy. And white was hoping that he could keep the control in the position, and it should be only him that should control the position. But we will see, by not accepting this sacrifice actually, Mikhail Tal got a very easy position. He played the move knight to e5, putting pressure on this f3 knight with his bishop as well as the knight. So knight takes e5 was played, bishop takes e5, and again he's toying with this idea of playing bishop takes h2, knight g4 and queen h4. So in the game white played the move knight c4 trying to get rid of this bishop, and after bishop takes h2 maybe he's trying to survive in this position somehow with the help of his queen creating some counter attack, or there can be some ideas of playing bishop takes h7 check and trying to distract black from doing this. But anyway, a much stronger version for black as played in the game was to play rook to d5, gaining a tempo. Tempo move is always good with the support of this knight on f6. Black gains the tempo attacking this queen and also prepares to rook along the h file. Now it is always useful if you have two pieces in the attack than one. So if let's say bishop takes h2 with the rook on d5 is much better because we can swing our rook also in the attack and it would be even more deadly. So that's what happened in the game actually. After rook to d5, queen to d2 was played, and now we have all the pieces in the attack, and Mikhail Tal went for bishop takes h2 check, breaking open the king to break open the king side of the Boris Spassky. And after bishop take h2 check, now this is the pattern in the h file mate that I'm talking about. We open up the h file in order to help our pieces to get to the h file with check and try to develop attack. So instead of playing quiet moves like knight to g4 and stuff, we open up the h file, and this is the pattern in the h file mate. So bishop take h2 check was played, king takes h2, rook h5 check. Now after king to g3, we would have here knight to e4, just clearing the path for our queen to come into the game, and it would be checkmate. So king to g3 was not played, king to g1 was played, and after knight g4, Spassky just resigned in this position because the threat in this position is actually to play the move rook to h1 check, forcing king takes h1 and then queen h4, queen h2, queen h1 would be checkmate because the rook is controlling the e file. For instance, if let's say white plays the move g3, then it's immediately mate after rook to h1 with the support of this bishop, known as the opera mate as we know. If let's say white plays the f3 in this position, then we have this move rook h1 check, king h1. Note that the king cannot go anywhere because of this wonderful knight on g4. And after this, it is just mate like this, queen h1, it's mate because the rook is covering the e file. Also after rook e1 we have rook h1 check, king h1, queen h4 and queen h2, and there are a lot of mates. Bishop g2 is mate, queen g2 is mate, queen h1 is mate, any way you want. Okay, so after knight g4 actually Boris Spassky resigned in this position because of this terrible threats of checkmate. So this is the way the h file mate works. With the move bishop takes h2 check, black opened up the king position, and then after knight to g4 he is threatening this typical sacrifice along this h file, bringing his queen with the tempo in the game, and then he just has easy winning position. So with this information, let us move ahead and let us look at some other examples of the h file mate. And now we have the game of Spassky again, but this time Spassky is on the offensive. He is playing with the white pieces against the former world champion Tigran Petrosyan, and this is actually from their world championship match. So let us look at this game now. So it was a Sicilian defense, and I will not go through entire game. I will just briefly go to the critical position. So this was the Najdorf variation, bishop g5 line. As you know, it's very aggressive system from white side. White puts all the pieces in the center and then tries to attack with pawns on the king side. So g4 pawn sacrifice was played by Boris Spassky, which was accepted. Knight takes g4, queen g2 and knight f6, and now rook to g1, bishop to d7. Currently the bishop on f8 is defending g7, so there is no problem there. And now f5, king to h8 was played, rook to f1, queen d8, f takes e6, f takes e6, and from this position we will analyze this game. So white played the fantastic move here, e5, attacking the pawn and the knight both. So d takes e5 was played, and now knight to e4, using a tactic that knight takes e4 is not possible because of rook takes f8 check, a brilliant move, removing the defender of the g7 pawn. And after rook take f8, queen take g7, it would be checkmate. So that is his idea of knight to e4. So in the game, knight to h5 was played. Now he played the move queen to g6. Now e takes d4 was played in the game, but let us see what would have happened in case of h takes g5. If sorry, yeah, here queen to g6 was played and e takes d4 is forced. Here actually we are threatening this knight and also threatening the move knight to g5, and that's what happened in the game. Black played e takes d4, and after knight to g5 we are threatening the mate on h7. So knight to f6 was played, and here let's say he takes this knight, then we have queen takes h5 check, king g8, queen f7 check, and after king h7 we have rook f3, and we are threatening this mate with rook to h3. Again a very similar one to the Greco's mate. Instead of bishop we have queen covering this both diagonal. You can say Greco mate or like Anastasia mate as well, without a knight but the queen supporting these two squares. So a typical example, and after e5 queen h5 it would be just checkmate. You know the pattern already. This bishop is suddenly opened up and we have the Greco's mate here. So you can see from one pattern how can we get into another pattern. So in the game after, so let's start look at this from this position again. Knight to e4, attacking the knight on f6. Obviously the threat is to play knight takes f6 with the support of this rook. That will completely shatter the black construction and there will be queen g8 ideas. So knight h5 was played, and after queen to g6 white is threatening this move knight to g5. So in the game ed4 was played, and after knight g5 knight to f6 was played, and here both moves actually work. Knight to f7 check wins the queen, and we can actually win a pawn here with knight takes h6 first, and then we can just pick up the queen and win easily. Or there is in this position, if you want you can just play rook takes f6 as well. The point is queen takes f6, queen h7 would be checkmate. So with the rook takes f6 we are basically removing the defender of the h7 square. So that is the point of this sacrifice, and we would have mate. So after the in the game actually after knight to g5 Petrosian resigned. He did not play any of this move knight f6 or h takes g5 as he is faced with this threat of checkmate. So this was a nice attacking game by Boris Spassky. Now let us move on to the next example. Again you will see knight g5 created a threat of mate, forcing open the h file, and then it was mate. So this is another way to open up the h file. Now this is the classic case of h file mate. I will just zip through these moves. So this was a Taimano variation, and this is not good example for the black players because white played a flawless game here. I'll just jump to a critical position because it's not possible to cover all the variations in detail, and in this position you will see we have this lovely bishops along these two diagonals. They are ready to being sacrificed in this position, and white played the move knight to b6. This knight is very often an annoying piece for white side that comes into the picture after sacrifice, defending everything. So white played this distraction theme sacrifice with the move knight to b6, which forks this knight and rook, and after black took this knight, instead of recapturing this knight, white just went for the kill. Bishop takes h7 check, king takes h7, bishop queen to h5 check first, king to g8, and bishop take g7. This is very typically known as the Lasker double bishop sacrifice, where we sacrifice these two bishops on these two squares to completely open up the black king. And now queen to h8 checkmate is threatened after bishop takes g7. So he has to recapture this bishop on g7, and now we play queen g4, forcing it to the h file. King f6 queen g5 would be checkmate, so that doesn't help, and after wherever it doesn't matter, king h7, king g8, or king h6, we will just play the move rook to f3 and it would be game over. This is known as the lawnmower mate that we will study later, but this is the concept in the h file mate, where after this beautiful move knight to b6, this removing the defender of this king side, after knight takes b6, bishop take h7 check, and then queen h5, and then bishop take g7, and white's attack was just flawless here. After rook to f3, black resigned because this checkmate is just unstoppable. And this is very typical example where we get such bishop sacrifices in order to open up the black king completely. So this was another example of the h file mate. Let us move on to the next example. Okay, I guess it is already a puzzle time. So this is the puzzle that I had prepared. Before that, let me check if I'm missing on any example. So Spassky Tal was done. Spassky, yeah, we have already seen three examples. So it is time for the puzzle now. Yeah, you can see the puzzle is not exactly related to the H file mate, but it is the game had featured that sacrifice. So I will show you a position from where we got this. This was a really flawless game by Miguel Najdorf. So I will just go briefly through these moves that he played, and I will stop at the position where we have the puzzle. So again, a Greek gift sacrifice was used in this position from the black side. Black played the move bishop takes h2 check, and the point is that king takes h2, knight g4 check, and we would have won this knight with the queen coming into the game. So that would have been deadly. But in the game, white played the move king to h1, and this is not good idea very often to not accept this sacrifice. As you know, there is a famous quote: the sacrifice is best refuted by accepting it. So you have to take this sacrifice and live with it. There is no way that you avoid this thing, because after this move knight g4 came anyway, attacking the knight. f4 was played, queen to e8, trying to swing the queen to the h file. g3, black played queen h5, so king g2, and here he played bishop g1. Fantastic move, creating this h2 square for his queen. And after knight takes g1, queen h2, king f3, he played e5, trying to open up his rook along this f file where the king is. And after this move he sacrificed his knight, and after knight takes e5, king f4, knight g6 check, king f3, f4 was played to open up this bishop as well. And after e takes f4, I'm pausing in this position. So it is black's move in this position, and you have to find the best continuation that wins for you. And it's not as easy as the last one, so it is slightly tricky. So it is black to play and win. You can pause the video, think. I have not shown you any solution here, so you can also move ahead, but just note down this position and type the answer in chat, and try to put all the answers in one comment so that it gets easy. And it is easy to read, and it is easy to check as well, because if you put a lot of comments, then I have to find that which boy has put which comment, and it gets difficult. So it is black's move, black to play and win. You have to win either the queen or checkmate. I have given the hint, so it's very easy, I guess, now after the hint. So let us move on to the next checkmate pattern that we have for today. This is known as the hookmate. For hookmate, actually, I have not focused on particular game. I have just picked up a lot of examples for you instead of showing the game, because a hookmate is one where we don't need it from the opening actually, because it's an actually a kind of an endgame pattern. Let me just check. Okay, so this picture defines the hookmate the best. So a hook is formed with the help of our knight, a rook, and a piece supporting the knight. So for hookmate, you have to remember these three pieces: a knight that creates a hook, a piece that protects the knight, and the rook that checkmates the king. So in this position, white can checkmate the black king in a very easy way with the move rook to c8, and it would be checkmate. Now remember this configuration: a knight defending a rook checking the king, and hence this particular configuration, this appears like hook, right? And it is also important that we have a piece protecting the knight, otherwise the knight would have been captured by the black king. So this is the configuration that is known as the hookmate, a configuration with the help of our knight and a rook. So you will see this in many examples, this particular pattern. So we will go through a lot of examples now, just to get the idea about this pattern. So let me go to the first example. Okay, so this is the game between Vasily Ivanchuk and Levon Aronian, and I will go to this position. So in this position, Levon Aronian is playing from the black side and Vasily Ivanchuk is playing from the white side. And this game shows a great example of the hookmate. You can see white has this beautiful knights on h4 and f5 and a nice rooks on the 7th rank. So white has the positional advantage in this position. Black's position is little cramped. He has two bishops and two rooks, but his king is not very safe on g5 between all these white pieces. And in this position, this is actually a blitz game, so no need to criticize any player here. But black played the move bishop takes c4, a very risky choice, opening up the 7th rank for the black white rooks. And Ivanchuk saw a very pretty combination here, and he forced the hookmate with the rook sacrifice, rook to g7 check. Now the point is the king has nowhere to go, all the squares are covered, and after rook to g6 we would just have rook takes g6, which would be checkmate. So bishop takes g7 is forced, but the problem is we have another rook that can come to g7, and now the only way to defend a checkmate is to play rook to g6. But now after rook takes g6 we have this hookmate. Remember the configuration again: a pawn protecting a knight protecting a rook, and the rook checking the king. This is like a circuit that we have in electric circuit, where there are three components: a pawn protecting a knight, knight protecting a rook like this, and a rook checking the king, and this completes our hook and it's a hookmate. So now let us go to the next example. This is the game of Judith Polgar, again very nice aggressive players, and we will see many examples. And let us jump to this position. So Judith is playing from black side here, so let us look from black's perspective. We often get this piece on g3 in King's Indian, that is just very dangerous piece for the white side, because it creates these threats of hookmate, and we will see what happened in this particular game as well. So Judith's last move was bishop to c3, and this move threatens rook to b1 check. So white in the game ignored this threat, hoping that he would have king f2 in this position, and probably the best that he could have done was to go back and cover the back rank. Actually, there was nothing else that he could have done, and it would have lost the exchange. But I think black would have even hesitated to give up this knight on g3 for the rook. But anyways, in the game bishop take g5 was played, and here she saw a beautiful checkmate, rook to b1 check. You know that after king to h2 we would have the hookmate with the move rook to h1 check. A pawn, a knight and a rook. I don't need to explain it again. These three pieces work in coordination to checkmate the king, and a same pattern that we have just seen. So in the game king to f2 was played, and this was her point, that after this check the white would have king to e3. But Judith had seen a wonderful combination here. She gave bishop d4 check, and after this move white resigned, because he realized that no matter how he blocks this check with rook or the bishop, the square for the king is blocked, and then rook to f1 would be actually checkmate. So in the, if let's say if you play bishop to e3, rook to f1 is checkmate, or even if you play rook to e3, the f3 square doesn't matter, because after rook to f1 we would have the hookmate again. So this little check with the bishop that forced the piece to the e3 square actually blocked the king, and then we had the hookmate again. So this was another example. Now let us move on to the next example. This was quite a tragic example actually for Peter Swidler from Russia. You know, very strong player, about 8 to 9 times I guess Russian champion, against a Boris Gelfand, also a world championship challenger, who played against Vishwanathan Anand. This was also rapid game, and Peter Swidler had a completely winning position. I will jump to that position. It was a very long game, and in this position Gelfand playing with the black pieces, he took the pawn on a3. Okay, and what Peter has to do here was just to recapture this knight, this tricky knight. You know, there is a saying, knight on a rim is dim, but if that knight remains alive and it comes back to g3, it's suddenly a monster. So white probably thought that knight on the rim is dim, it will not do anything, and he just took on d5 in this position. But Boris Gelfand had set a very nice trap in this position using this knight on h1, which apparently looks trapped. In this position, king takes h1 would have given white a very nice position after rook to a1, king to a2, bishop takes c4, rook takes c4. White would have played this move rook b4, and this outside pass pawn definitely gives white some advantage. Probably it's a winning position for white as well. So this would have been just easy, but instead he did not see any trick with the knight on h1, and he just took this piece, the extra piece after all. But Boris played rook to a1 check, and no matter where the king goes, actually the king has only one square in this case. So after king to h2, he played knight to g3, and suddenly it's very difficult to get out of this mating construction. Rook to h1, hook mate is threatened, and there is, even though white has extra bishop in this position and a rook, he can't do anything actually, because the rook controls the first rank, and after bishop e1 we will just take this, and this mating construction is so forced that you just cannot defend against this checkmate, and it's instant resignation for white. So from this winning position, where he could have just instead of taking on d5, could have captured on a1 h1 and then would have won this rook endgame, he just played bishop take d5, overlooking the threat actually in the position, and after check and knight g3, he had to resign because of this mate threat. Again, this was a rapid game, so both the players must be in terrible time pressure, but still, even at such a level, this thing happened, and Gelfand won the game. So this was a painful example for Peter Swidler. Now let us look at if we have any other example of this pattern. Okay, I will show you one more example, I guess, of this pattern, starting from this position. Okay, so white is an unknown player actually. I don't know his name, but the black player is Lubomir Lubojevic, who is in terrible pressure in this position after white's last move, rook to h4, threatening rook takes h7 check, and it would be checkmate because there will be queen joining on the d6 square as well. For instance, if you play a move like bishop to c6, protecting your bishop that was hanging on g2, it would be mate after rook takes h7 and queen to d6. So in the game, after rook to h4, h5 was played, trying to defend this position, but white just played knight takes h5. The point is, after g takes h5, queen to g5 check, this rook on d8 is suddenly hanging. So this would have been mate after queen g5, and then there will be rook h8 and so on. There are lines that you can go through, but this was basically mate. You can check these lines basically. So in the game, after knight takes h5 check, king to f8 was played, but white played the move queen to d8 check, king g8, and now knight f6. Because of this pin, this knight cannot be taken, because then queen d8 and queen f6 would come. So king to g7 was played, and after rook to h7, we have a different version of a hook mate, a horizontal version we can say it like, but the construction essentially is the same. Three pieces forming the hook, a pawn, a knight, and a rook. A pawn supporting the knight, and knight supporting the rook, and rook checking the king. So this was another example of the hook mate, and now I have a puzzle for all of you. This is a really beautiful puzzle. So I will jump to this position. So this was a crazy game between two players from the past, very well-known players actually, David Janowski and Karl Schlichter. So white's last move was rook a to g1, and he's putting pressure on this g7 pawn. And since this is the last position, I would give you a little more exercise, little more than a puzzle. So in the game, black played the move rook f to f7 in this position. So this is the puzzle for all of you. It is white to play and win. You can note down this position. It is white's move in this position, and it is white to play and win. You can type the answer in the chat saying that hook mate position and then the answer. But my question to you is, what would have happened instead of this move rook to f7, which is apparently a blunder? What would have happened in case of a5? How would you continue the attack? This is only for the batch A students, an exercise. What is exactly white's attacking plan here? But the puzzle for all is obviously after rook to f7 what happens. This is puzzle for all. Okay, so now let us move on to our final pattern, which is kill box mate. Now this is not actually a very popular pattern, but still it has a name. And a kill box pattern is usually named by this construction. In this position, white can play the rook to d8, and this queen and rook they very often create a mating net for the king. And this is the particular position that we are talking about when we are discussing the kill box mate. So a queen protecting the rook, which is checking the king. And now there are actually various versions of this. So in this position, let's say we can have a king on g3 and a queen on f1. And now the pattern is known as a railroad mate. When we play rook check, then queen check, and then we will get to this position after a series of checks, but the final position will be like this. And this is referred to as a kill box, where a king is killed inside a box that is created by this heavy pieces. So quite an easy pattern actually, and we will see some examples of it. Yeah, the first example that I want to show is by the great Alexander Alekhine or Alekhine, and this is the position. So Alekhine is playing with the black pieces here, and you can see he's 3 pawns down in this position. And in this position actually queen e4 was a very good move. Since this pawn on g7 is protected, it would have been a double attack on the rook as well as on the pawn on g2, threatening the mate and winning the rook. But instead of this, Alekhine decided that he wants to have some fun, and he played the move rook takes g2 check. Very strange choice, because in heavy pieces we generally need to protect our pieces, but he goes for the attack even with such a limited material. And white plays the move king to h1. After king to g2, white was probably playing for a win in this position since he is 3 pawns up. But after rook takes g2, the problem for white would have been that after king takes g2 it is a forced draw. After queen e4, king f1, and then perpetual check. After queen to e4 check, it would have been a perpetual. So for avoiding that, white played for the win with the move king to h1. But now you will see what happened. Rook takes h2 check, king takes h2, queen h4 check, and now actually after a series of check, black is going to win back this rook. So he won 2 pawns for nothing basically in this position. And after king g1, queen take f2 check, he won 1 more pawn, and now suddenly it's equal pawn. And after queen g6 check, as I already told you, he had to lose this rook. If let's say you go to, he went to h1 in the game, but let's say you go to h2, then there will be rook f2 check. So for avoiding rook f2 check, he went to h1. But if this would be made with the construction that we know, queen to h5, queen to h2, and now the box is created. Rook to f4 check, queen to f4. Now this pattern is known as a railroad mate, where we run this king along this so-called railway track, we can say. And after rook f4, this king is dragged till the end, and it's a checkmate. So in the game, after queen to g6 check, king to h1 was played, but here black just took the rook on b1, and after king g2 he continued attack. And finally after rook f3, king h4, queen to g3 check, king h5, g6. White resigned here, since after queen h6 we have queen h4 check, king g6, and rook f6. Again a typical example of the kill box mate. So the king is captured in between this box and checkmated with the help of the 2 pieces. So this was the first example in the kill box mate. Let us see if we have some more. Yeah, this one is another example. Yeah, this is the position, and in this position black played this very interesting move g5, which creates a mate threat of queen f4 and queen h4. White actually has positional advantage in this position because his pieces are nicely centralized along the e file. Also he has this pawn on f5, which is quite a nice piece. But black found this very nice move g5, which suddenly creates this checkmate threat in the position. And after the en passant, it would be queen f4 check and queen h6 check, and it would have been a perpetual check. So black found this very nice idea with g5. White played rook e4, which is good move, and after queen d3 check, king g4, queen d2, He decided to play king h6, queen h6 for some reason, sacrificing his pawn on g2. What he did not see was that after queen h5, black has this move queen to h3 check, which suddenly creates a kill box for the white. And after king takes g5, rook takes f5, it was actually a checkmate. So this was another nice example where black found this nice move g5, creating some play. But because white was over ambitious and he played the move queen to h6, he suddenly fell into this typical mating trap with the move with the kill box mate pattern. And now I guess I have a position for all of you. So this is the position, and uh, yeah, black played rook takes e4 and queen d3, and it is black to play and win in this position. Again, a very easy position. I guess all of you can solve it, and you can just type your answers in the chat. It is black to play and win. So we have four positions. So you have four positions for homework, four easy positions. One of them is slightly difficult, I guess, the one with the Miguel Naidorf playing with the black pieces. But again, I have given a hint to you there. So I guess all are easy. So you can type all the answers in the chat. That would be great. Instead of typing it individually, instead of typing the individual answer, type it in a group, and that would be nice. If you learn to keep the timestamp, that would be even better. And so this was it for today. We have learned the four patterns. The Greco's mate, again, just to revise, the Greco's mate is the one where the bishop cuts along the diagonal covering the escape square and a heavy piece checks along the h file. In the h file mate, we break open the h file. We have seen two examples where we do that. In the hook mate, there are three pieces that are required: a knight, a piece checking the king, that is a rook or queen, and a piece supporting the knight. So these three pieces form the hook. And the last one was the kill box mate, where with just rook and queen we can checkmate the enemy king. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I wish all of you a happy Diwali. Enjoy with your family and friends, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.